What's happening, gang? Back live. ESPN Radio Studios, Thursday at 10. It's actually 10:30 now, but it's still time for some truth. Truth Radio, Joel. Basically, all you got to do to win this game is do what your mama told you. Just tell the truth.
But I'm a lawyer. I don't know how to do that.
You have to start every sentence with "it depends."
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
It's possible.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is who the paparazzis couldn't get their hands off of on the way into the studios today. That's Joel Incorvaia, the brains and the man behind Incorvaia Associates.com, but you can catch him online at Incorlaw. That's INCORLAW.com, correct?
That's correct.
My man.
That's our website.
So let's do this, Joel. You know, if Alex kind of set the foundational tone of how, what structure needs to kind of be in place, let's get a little more specific. Let's actually drill down into the real estate domain specifically. Now, you and I were rapping earlier about like neighbors, right? And you always want to get along with your neighbors. You know, Steve, if you had a little neighbor song you could cue up behind us right now. I know I'm putting you on the spot. It's not possible. But it doesn't always go that way, right?
No.
So let's tell the truth about bad fences and good neighbors.
Well, I wanted to talk about some things that I think are relevant to our audience, and we've handled numerous disputes between neighbors over what oftentimes seem to be kind of ridiculous subjects. But what we found, and I think we all know, is that it's still true today that, you know, a man's home is his castle.
Mm-hmm. Oh, now that,
and we
point for that one.
You know, and
all true.
And we, yeah, and really rational, highly intelligent people will go crazy when they feel like somebody is intruding into their castle, their land, their property, doing anything to disturb their privacy or their domain.
Yeah.
And
this ain't even Texas.
Yeah, this isn't even Texas. I mean, right here in Southern California. And actually, it may be worse because now we have homes on these tiny little lots, and we're literally living right on top of each other.
Yeah.
And also, neighbors don't really know each other that well anymore.
No.
It's not like the old days where you lived in the same neighborhood for 50 years. Now people are moving, coming and going, and so they don't even know their neighbors until they have a problem.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, those things can escalate into even violence, certainly lawsuits. And I was going to tell a story because this was...
And Joe, and if you... your fans know you who you are, but maybe if someone hasn't been introduced to you yet, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm a real estate lawyer. I've been practicing law in San Diego, and particularly now in Del Mar for 37 years. And I'd say about 70-80% of my practice relates to all aspects of real estate law, from working with developers, working with contractors, working with mortgage lenders, and just ordinary people that have issues that come up pertaining to real estate. So we say, if it touches dirt, we do it.
Hallelujah. And I wanted to give you that solid, too, because the truth is, man, we're so lucky and humbled to have someone of your resume, we'll just say, generally speaking, to be able to come and actually vote in and raise a hand to this conversation. So more specifically, please, pick up where you left off.
Well, I live in Alevinhain, which is eastern Encinitas, and we actually had a real tragic event that occurred just 2 years ago that fits right into this story. And actually, the victim who was murdered was a friend of mine. His name was John Upton. He actually had been well known because in the 90s, he used to go to Eastern Europe and rescue orphans from some of the former communist countries, like Romania, I think. And so he'd actually been on national TV. He was kind of a well-known fellow. And he was renting a house, and next to it, there was this empty lot, and this Russian immigrant bought the lot, and he was going to build his dream home on it. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, even without building, he had shrubs and trees there. He wanted to keep them trimmed. So every few months, he'd go there, trim them, cut them back. And John, the neighbor, didn't like it because he thought it was impacting his privacy. So apparently, they had a couple talks, a couple arguments. And so one day, this fellow comes with a crew to do some trimming. And he decides, you know what, I'm going to protect myself. If John comes near me, I'm going to bring a gun. So he brings a pistol, 45 Wesson, with him. And sure enough, John sees them, and he comes out just to talk to him. He's walking down the road. He's 20 feet away. And without saying a word, this man just pulls out a gun and shoots him dead. Wow. So he was convicted of first-degree murder, of course. And John, who had 3 children, is dead at 56 years old. And why? Because they were fighting over shrubs. And it just shows you how emotional people can be about property. their
What a
rights as property
story,
owners.
Man. I'm speechless.
And basically, yeah, all their common sense just goes away. And this poor man, the murderer now, his defense at trial was it was self-defense. I thought
Of course it was, right.
I thought he had a gun. Well, he had a cell phone. The jury didn't buy it.
Thank
So
God.
now he's going to be in prison the rest of his life, and his family will never really have him home. So that's why you need to be thinking about how do I resolve these kinds of disputes without
right.
taking it to that level.
So with a premise like that, help us now tell some truth about that. So I'm not suggesting that someone's going to find themselves exactly in that story. Let's
Right.
hope not. But for the rest of us, we can sort of sprinkle some consciousness in
Sure.
and around that story to come up with our own.
Well, let me talk about some of the things that we see. We actually have litigated before that come up quite often when neighbors have problems. And I think one of the most common problems we see are issues regarding fences. Because particularly when you get properties that were developed a long time ago,
Right.
oftentimes you'll find out maybe years after you bought your property that your neighbor's fence is actually 5 or 6 feet onto your proproperty. Or
Happens
maybe
all the
your
time.
fence is on the neighbor's property and you didn't put the fence up. It was just the house came that way.
Yeah.
And so somebody decides, I'll just do a survey to make sure I know where the boundary is. And they get the survey out there and, oh, wow, now we've learned this fence isn't where we thought it was. It's really not on the boundary. What are we going to do about it? So the person who owns the fence, of course, he wants to keep it there. The person who now knows the fence is on his property wants it moved because, legitimately, he's saying, hey, I got 10 feet of land here. I want to use it. And I just don't want this fence on my property. And it can become very, very emotional. Mm-hmm. So the person who owns the fence, they'll go to a lawyer and they'll say, well, don't I have prescriptive rights? I mean, this fence has been here for 30 years. Don't I have adverse possession rights? Or
Prescription rights, kind of like another way of talking about grandfathering in something. True or
well,
false?
basically, under certain circumstances, you can take title to somebody's land if you use it and treat it as your own land for a period of time, usually 10 years.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
So
wow.
we call that the law adverse possession, but there's certain things you have to do, like pay taxes on it and things like that.
Aha.
So
Which
it's very
that,
hard
of
to
course,
do.
is always going
Very
to
hard
trump
to
it
do.
because
Yeah.
no one, right?
Nobody's paying taxes.
No one's paying taxes, right?
On that land.
Right.
So, but they think, hey, it's been there. I should have the right to keep it. So you go to a lawyer, and the lawyer, if he knows the law, will say, you know what, you don't have a leg to stand on because that fence is encroaching in your neighbor's land, and under California law, you really don't have rights to adverse possession. So you're going to have to figure out a way to move it, and maybe you should cooperate with your neighbor in doing it. But I found many people just don't want to do that. And a couple of years ago, I had a case, and I had a client that bought a property, I think in University City, and it was a pretty big lot. It had a big hill, and way on the top of the hill was a little fence that this elderly woman owned. And again, it was a 30-year-old fence. And he had his property surveyed, and he found out that fence was 10 feet onto his land. Now, it was on a hill. So he was never going to really use that. He wasn't going to go up that hill. But he just felt as a matter of principle, that fence should be removed. So we had to file a lawsuit, and the lawyer for the neighbor refused to agree that it was our right to remove it, and she didn't want to move it, so we actually went to trial. So we sat actually in court for a day, and I felt so bad because I had this 78-year-old woman up there testifying and about her fence and how much she loved her fence, and she didn't want to move it. And we presented our case, and the judge said, yeah, I'm really sorry, ma'am, but your fence doesn't belong on the neighbor's property.
Right.
So my client won, and after a year of litigation, the fence had to be removed. So that's
and what's
an issue we see a
horrifying
lot.
about this, and this is the classic scenario, right? It's like the removal of the fence, the erection of the fence, and then the removal of the fence is probably a nominal fee.
Right.
But then
Yes.
a year in litigation over the fence, for goodness sakes.
So
from
everybody
the
spent a
start
small
to
fortune.
the end, that was a year for you.
Took a year to go to court. That's typical in San Diego.
Yeah.
And it was a case that should have been resolved.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a common issue. Another issue that we see quite a bit is what we call a common dividing line or your boundary fence. You put the fence right on the boundary. Mm-hmm. And if you do that and both parties are benefiting from the fence, then one party should be paying 50% of the cost of building and maintaining that fence. Because, like I have really old wood fences, corral-type fences in my yard, and after 25 years, they're all rotting. I have actually fences on the boundaries of both my properties, and I put them in. But going to my neighbor and saying, "Hey, would you mind ponying up $2,000?"
Right.
It's not even worth it. But legally, you can do it. I mean, if that fence is right on the boundary and both parties benefit, because my neighbors benefit from the fact that there's separation between our properties.
Well, and in my practice, you can always tell who paid for the fence because it's whatever side the pretty boards are on.
Right.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. So the pretty side's on mine. Huh?
Yeah.
But they do benefit because they extended their fence around, where my fence ended. So a lot of people don't know that you can go to your neighbor and say, "Hey, you should be paying 50% of the cost of maintaining this fence or even in building it if it's right on the boundary line between the two properties."
But so if they refuse, then a court can
you can sue
obligate them?
You can go,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
here's the bill.
I didn't know that.
But again, you have to be careful because they are your neighbors. I know in my
Right.
situation, the neighbors weren't very excited about doing it, and I thought, I'd rather be friends with them and not have to go to court.
Yeah.
I'll eat the money.
Yeah.
But a lot of
even if
people
you-
take it very seriously. They know, like, I'm owed this money, so they don't care about the relationships as much as the principles.
I know. And it's like you wish that they could
Right.
get that,
Exactly.
But the
Right.
truth is, though, it sometimes, in my life, I'll say, but definitely this ends up manifesting in my practice. Like, I think about these as being emotional deposits into the bank account.
Right.
Not necessarily. It's like we get paid for everything we do in this life, and sometimes even with money.
Right.
So it's like, even if it's just sort of a seed that you plant, like, hey, look, you don't want to do it. I totally get that. And I go, legally, I could probably make you do it.
Right.
I'll just do it and be the hero. So they're like, hey, that Joel guy's not so bad.
Right.
But in any
Well,
event, so here's what I want to do, though, Joel. Do me a favor again. I shared your web address as incorlaw.com. But if someone wants to use the old school method of giving you a call, what's the best number for you?
858-259-2220.
858-259-2220.
That's right.
My man, Joel, and you're right up there off the 5, right?
We're right off Loma Santa Fe,
Yep.
and actually have a Del Mar address. We say the old Jenny Craig building. It's that wooden glass building. It sits right on the freeway.
Yep.
It's really pretty. We've been there about 12 years.
It's called the Timbers, right?
Timbers,
Yeah,
now.
I
Now
think
the
so.
Timbers, yeah.
Beautiful little spot down there. And so if we could sort of summarize that first, I know we got some, literally, I'm agape at the first story about
Right.
the guy actually getting shot
Yeah.
who you knew.
Right.
That's a tragic story for both families. And then the fence thing. So if you could sort of summarize your first 2 points, what would you say the truth about them was?
Well, the truth is you need to know what your rights are and whether what you're doing is correct, legal, or not. But I think you also have to be looking at, do I really want to see something escalate to the point, even if I have rights, even if I'm correct legally, do I want it to escalate to a point where there might be a violent encounter with a neighbor who's taking it personally or doesn't agree with your position? Because it's unbelievable how many times people will get in fistfights and do all kinds of crazy, violent things towards each other over these little tiny issues because it's their land. As I said, their property, and they don't act rationally.
Yeah. Fair enough, Joel. And I actually even learned something too, my man. So I love that about you guys. And you come in here, you're teaching me all the time too, and furthering our purpose on this show of leaving you, San Diego, a little better than how we found you. Hanging out with my man Joel Incorvaia, and heard earlier from Alejandro Rodriguez. So coming up, Joel, let's do this. Can we put a part 2 on this
Sure.
process? So we're right in the middle of bad fences and good neighbors and learning some truth about it. We'll be right back. Real Talk.